Hey guys, hope you're doing good. Today we are going to have a discussion on career growth with Satish and Arjun. Satish, why don't you go ahead with your first question?
Yeah, sure. Karthik, my first question is, when so at some point of time, from there is a transition, right, from mid to senior level. There will be two career paths. One is an individual contributor, like where coding is predominant, and there is the second path is like a team lead, more management and less code, like an engineering manager versus tech lead or a principal engineer. When given an option to lead the team, uh, how should we evaluate the option? Personally, let's say I want to code more, but I want to contribute in helping others as well.
So, the couple of things here. Firstly, you don't need to have any kind of formal role such as lead or manager to help people. It's more of a sense of responsibility. It could be interns, it could be new joinees, it could be anybody, right? Help people,
Hmm.
right? It could be an area in which you know the code very well, better than the other people on the team, even if they are at the same level of seniority as you, career wise.
Hmm.
So it could be any of these things, right? You don't need a role. In fact, often the role is given to people who are already doing the work.
Okay.
So, for example, promotions in well done companies like Google work that way. You need to show
Hmm.
that I'm already an X, then you get the job title of X.
Okay.
So, it's more like recognizing what you already are. So, yeah, so don't let that hold you back. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you are not in either of these roles currently, it's always good to be a tech lead first, then a manager, right? I'm assuming
Got
you're
it.
asking about these two roles, right? Tech lead and manager.
Yes.
Because it gives you a base to be a manager later on. You'll be a better manager.
Hmm.
The other thing is, if you are given an option that you haven't been given before, any opportunity to do something new,
Hmm.
it could be taking responsibility for the hiring for your entire company, anything at all. When you are given an option to do something new, say yes. Sometimes you have people who have rigid career growth ideas. One guy told me, this year I learned React Native, next year I learned machine learning, third year I learned something else. Unfortunately, we don't get options or opportunities based on our rigid plans. Opportunities come when they come. If we are smart, we'll grab them.
Got it.
So, if you are not in any of these roles, typically first you should be a tech lead. If you are already a tech lead and you are offered this position, say yes, do it wholeheartedly for a couple of years. Then only you will be able to evaluate. How can you evaluate something you haven't tried? If I ask
Hmm.
you whether you like pasta and you've never eaten pasta, how can you tell me? So
Hmm.
do it and then evaluate. Don't overthink first. But how much ever time you do it wholeheartedly. Don't do it reluctantly, like, oh man, I don't like to do this, but I'm doing it. Don't have that attitude. Do it wholeheartedly. And then after 2 years, if you decide this role is not for you, you can always
Hmm.
go back. In fact,
Got it.
that is similar to what I have done. I have managed people. I would like to
Hmm.
think I'm good at it, but I don't enjoy it. I don't think that's the right role for me. So now I don't take on primarily people management type jobs. But that experience has made me richer. So the answer is anything you haven't done before, if you are given an opportunity, say yes.
Got it. Yeah, Karthik. To summarize, we should not overthink, and we should try it out for few years wholeheartedly, then evaluate
Yes.
instead of evaluating premature.
Yes.
Got it. I'll go with the second question.
Sure.
So it is for the feedbacks. Uh, so how often I should ask feedbacks from other function leads to work effectively? Does asking for feedback at some point becomes annoying or makes me weak?
Does asking for feedback come across as annoying? I mean, if you ask too often, every few weeks, then you won't have sufficient time to make a change. Then it will be like, I'm giving you the feedback, but it still remains the same. Then it will be annoying and people are like, why am I doing this? That's the first part. Second part is you can always encourage people to talk openly with you. You can call it feedback, you can choose to use a different word. But often what happens, especially when working with people from different functions, is they look at it differently. They have certain goals, they may have certain frustrations, whatever, right? Typically, we don't share them. Because we are concerned, we should talk only about work and not emotions. Actually, emotions are very important, right? We are emotional people, we are not robots. So, if somebody is annoyed with you, somebody thinks it's not going well, etc., ask them to be open with you in these conversations. So, let's say you are working with a salesperson. They are feeling that speed of development, let's say, is not good on the inside. Ask them to share that concern with you openly. Then only you can work on it and you will develop a relationship. Often people keep their opinions to themselves and they act based on the opinions, but you don't know why they are doing that. For example, in this case, the salesperson may end up asking you every 3 days, is it done, is it done, is it done? And you may be annoyed. And I've had salespeople being told by engineers, go away, don't disturb me. Now, if people share their concerns openly, they can work together. By the way, let me know if there's some noise coming on my side.
No.
Cool. So, encourage people to be open with you. Create a spirit of comfort and trust. Often people don't say these things because they're concerned it can backfire, people can get angry, etc., etc. Right? If you are in the same city, go to lunch with them, go to a lake, go to a park, get out of the office so that people loosen up and they feel more comfortable with you as a person. And spend some time, like people when they are working, suddenly you can't ask questions and expect an answer. You need to give like half an hour for their mind to shift from whatever they are working on to this. Right? And ask them questions like, what can I do differently? And things like that, right? What is going well? What is not going well? Right? And understand what people are thinking of you. So that is one thing. Feedback, you can ask when a project is completed. Right? If a project is going on for multiple quarters, long project, right? Then you could ask every quarter. But asking feedback too much is also a bad sign because you lose your perspective. You start obsessing about, oh, what is Ramesh thinking, what is Suresh thinking, what is Neha thinking. You start getting worried, which is again not constructive. Because all of us, we are unique, right? We are not a Xerox copy of somebody else. And asking feedback too much makes us be what they are. But then, so it's easy to get caught up in the cycle of doing what others want too much. Like you should do what others want to a certain extent, but not too much. When you do too much, what happens? So suppose you are taking a certain amount of time to do a project. Suppose someone like the salesperson who doesn't know the amount of time it takes, which is not his fault. He's a salesperson, not an engineer. He says, do it fast. You do it fast and it has a lot of bugs. Then they will hold you responsible for it. They'll say, Satish has delivered buggy software. And so, being over-responsive to feedback is also a problem. So, which is why you shouldn't ask too often. Once a quarter, once in 2 quarters is also fine. So, at Google, the system was, everyone gets feedback annually. And then, so there is one performance cycle that happens every winter, let's say, and one that happens every summer.
Okay.
Now, one of these, I forget which is which. I'll just say winter. Winter cycle is mandatory for everyone. Everyone has to get reviews from the people they're working with. The summer one is optional. If you want feedback, you can go for it, or if you want a promotion, you can go for it.
Okay.
So that way, everyone was getting feedback once a year.
Hmm.
But the important thing is that you have to make a change. So that is why you're right in suspecting that asking feedback too often won't be constructive.
Got it.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, Karthik. I'll summarize what I understood. So, at some point of time, if it is very frequent, there are two problems. One, it comes across as wrong, or it won't be very helpful for both sides. Second thing is, uh, if we go very often with the feedbacks, we might lose out our originality, right? Cross functions. Sometimes if we take instead of specific feedbacks, if we take all the generic feedbacks, that might actually affect the performance instead of improving. Second thing is, we should get comfortable with the functions or the people we are working with, and we need to give enough time to evaluate what is going good and what is not. And third thing is, we should ask specific feedbacks. For example, instead of going to a person here and asking, "Hey, what do you think about me?" What they will say. I should ask specific feedback. Right? Hey, do we need to improve the velocity of engineering delivery? So yeah, these are the three takeaways.
Great, good summary.
Shall I go with the next question? Next question is regarding upskilling. At various stages of my career, I had multiple roles. For example, when I started out as a junior, I started with iOS development. I was very worried with the Stack Overflow surveys that only 2% or 3% adaptation in the whole tech is iOS.
Sorry?
In Stack Overflow survey, Swift or iOS adoption was very less comparatively to other tech, like JavaScript being 57%, Python being 40%, like that, right? So I was worried that, hey, should I continue being an iOS developer or should I take the highest trend, like React? When I moved into web, again, I got a lot of dilemmas. Hey, should I be a web engineer? Should I become AI?
When you moved into what?
Web.
Vim, the text editor?
Web development.
Okay.
So even though I'm very comfortable at the stacks and everything, so there is still some doubts or dilemmas about, hey, should we take the frameworks that are in current trend, right? So yeah, that is one part. My main question is, should I focus more on core engineering concepts like architecture, design patterns, or should I focus on going more deep with the tools or frameworks I'm currently working? Or should it be a mix of both? Is my question clear?
The question is clear. I'll just say something in a light-hearted manner. I'm going out. Should I focus on my shirt or my pants? I need to wear both, right?
Correct.
So maybe you can start with the outcome. Let's say you're asked to deliver a feature, build a new feature in the app. As part of that, whatever frameworks are needed, you'll learn it. If you're working on the backend, for example, and you feel functions as a service is a good thing to explore, you can say, hey, just for this, why don't we do this as an experiment? Anyway, functions as a service can be incrementally adopted. You can build some endpoints using FAS and others using your monolith, right? Or microservices or whatever you have. So it's not like migrating the entire thing. So in this example, you're asked to build a feature and you feel a framework would be good to build this feature. It will be better, it will be faster, it will be less DevOps work to maintain it and so on. So you can propose a framework. Similarly, design pattern. If you have a problem, you can come up with a design pattern to solve it. So for example, in a camera app, when you tap the screen, you get a square on screen to indicate that it's focused, right? In FutureCam, our photography app, let me just see if I can open the site. In FutureCam, we had a bug where sometimes if you tap twice quickly, you would get two squares on the screen. I solve this by making it a singleton, the focus square class. So now, no matter what you do, you cannot allocate a second focus square.
There will be always only one
Yes.
instance.
So design pattern, right, is a means to an end. So that's one thing. So again, driven by outcomes, right? So so design patterns, frameworks, tools. Yeah. So the other thing with frameworks is many people are obsessed with adopting the newest framework. You don't need that. Whenever a new mobile is launched in the market, do you go buy it? You don't, right? Like, you need to upgrade periodically every few years. So my rule of thumb is to ignore a new framework for 3-4 years. Half the time it disappears. People are no longer talking about it. Because otherwise there's always something new, and by the time you learn something, especially in JavaScript, I wouldn't be surprised if a new framework got released when we are talking here, right? So you'll never be good at anything if you keep doing that, right? And you'll just confuse yourself with so many frameworks and tools and design patterns and this and that, right? So you can wait a few years. The problem comes when people are stuck with a technology forever. I was interviewing someone who says he's been working with Java for 15 years. When you're stuck for a long time, you don't learn. So a few years is fine. After that, you should explore. And if you explore and find that the tool you use is still the best tool for the job, great. But at least you should explore a new framework. You shouldn't work for 7 years on, let's say, iOS. But in the first 2 years, don't worry about it. So Swift, the right time to adopt it was 3.0. A couple of years after 1.0, because it was not stable. They had backward incompatibility and all these things. Similarly, Swift UI, probably this year is the right time to adopt it if you are starting a new project. If you were starting a new iOS project 2 years back, Swift UI was not ready. So new frameworks, there's often a lot of hype. People are excited, there are talks at WWDC or whatever the conference is, people blog about it, people tweet about it, there's so much hangama. But wait for a few years, let it get stable, right? So yeah, with frameworks, that is the thing. You should even, so if you're a, let's say, backend engineer, sooner or later you should explore any new framework that has come out. And not any you feel would be relevant. So again, let's take a different example, front end. If you're good at React or Vue, it's fine. The more important thing is to be good at one thing. Many people don't realize that. If you're an expert at anything, C#, Spring, any technology, that's good. You're better than 90% of engineers out there. So always be good at one tool to get the job done. Like really good, where you know all the parts of it that are relevant. For example, if you're building an iOS app, what are the aspects you need to know? Permissions, Xcode, the IDE, Apple's App Store Connect for submitting apps, maybe some unit testing framework like XCTest or whatever. You need to know threading or queuing, as iOS calls it. You need to know one way to build a UI. It need not be the latest Swift UI. It can be an older UI technology like UIKit. That's okay. The question is not, do you know Swift UI? The question is, can you build a UI? Again, outcomes, not technologies. You need to know networking, maybe Alamo, Fire, whatever, pick one. So many people are obsessed about missing out, but they don't get good at one thing in the first place. So yeah, so basically let the outcomes and the opportunities you are given drive all this. Tomorrow, if you are asked, hey Satish, why don't you be a backend architect? Then you may spend more time thinking about, for example, should we start exploring functions as a service? Whereas if you're given a feature and you propose this and your lead says, no, let's not do that now, that's also fine. So again, let everything be driven by the outcomes.
Understood. Yeah, Karthik, that answers my question. Let me quickly summarize it. So there are few takeaways, right? First one is irrespective of tech, being good at one stack is more important than knowing the latest tech or the trend. Second thing is any learning that should be driven by outcome. For example, if I want to build a scalable UI, then maybe going with the framework that is easier to develop or easier to maintain, easier to scale, we can learn and we can adopt it. So slowly with outcomes, each and upcoming outcomes, we can learn and we can grow. Just a second.
Arjun, do you have any comment while Satish comes back?
No, not so far.
You're muted, Satish. Now you're muted.
Am I audible now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So regarding upskilling, it is clear.
Okay.
Based on the outcomes, we need to take the tech decisions.
Yes.
Both on learning and
Yes. And just one clarification I would like to make here. When I say outcomes, sometimes people mistake it to mean somehow I'll get it done. That's not what I mean. So if you're asked to build a feature and you know some technology which is not the best technology, by all means learn the right technology for the job. For example, in CSS, if you know only absolute positioning, don't use absolute positioning somehow to get the job done. Learn what is needed. So outcomes based does not mean don't learn. It means learn what is necessary for the outcome. That's what I wanted to clarify.
got it. Yeah. I'll go with the next question. Again, this is more on like imposter syndrome, like our dilemma. Should front-end engineers or it is basically my question, personal question. Should I worry about not being a full stack engineer? I'm good and comfortable at front-end engineering, but not knowing back-end engineering, will it be a blocker at some point of time in the career?
Can you build a simple backend? Say we are building a notes app. You will need typical CRUD endpoints, right? Create a note, edit, update, etc. Share. Can you build a backend for that?
I can do it in two ways.
Mm-hmm.
One, I can simply plug in like you mentioned, like backend as a service tools, like
Okay.
Firebase, and I can do that. Or yeah, I can build a small entry-level Node.js or a Flash kind of a backend system. Yes, I can do that.
So you are a full stack engineer then. You just haven't worked on scale like a product with 100 million users. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a basic understanding or basics. I can do a small skeleton setup in the backend and I can plug into front end. I can do that. But yeah, I have never worked in a full-fledged backend system.
So all the jobs and projects you have done, they are all on front end and mobile, is it? You have never worked like full time on back end for a few quarters?
No.
I see. Okay, got it. Okay. So the first thing I would say is an excellent front end and mobile engineer is better than a mediocre full stack engineer. Right? And people get too obsessed about labels. For example, a few years back, ML was really hot. Everyone would say, I'm an ML engineer. And I asked him, okay, great. Tell me how you traded off precision for recall. And they don't give an answer, right? Or whatever it is in ML. So, being good at one thing is better than being mediocre at three different things.
Okay.
And in any job, front end is a full-time work, mobile is a full-time work, back end is a full-time work. You can't possibly do 10 things at once. So even if you know 10 things, you're going to do probably one, maybe 1.5 max, right? And so that is one point, being good at one thing. So the second aspect is liking. Different people have different tastes. Like early in my career, when I was doing hands-on coding full time, I liked front end and mobile more than back end because I cared about UX. I was not too enthusiastic about algorithms. I was more interested in meeting the user's needs. Right? How can we present it to the user in a different way so that there's less friction in using our app as opposed to some other app and all these things. So this goes back to these terms, product engineer. A product engineer is someone who gets joy out of building a product that users use. He doesn't get joy in building complex algorithms. He thinks complex algorithms are a nuisance. They're harder to write, they're harder to validate, harder to debug, everything. They take more CPU. Simple algorithms are better. So at Google, we used to have conversations where some backend engineer over lunch would happily say, hey, I built a system that processes whatever, 10 terabytes of data. And he would be so happy and full of joy and share it with me. And I would be completely unimpressed. I would say, how did that help users? And he was like, what is this guy asking me? Right? So that was the difference in motivation, right? A product engineer cares about the product, whereas like a engineering engineer, for lack of a better word, cares about the algorithms. He thinks complex algorithms are better, they're more fun, they're more cool. I also appreciate them, but I care more about the outcome, the product engineer role. So this is one more thing that may affect what you like. Right? And ultimately, being a great front-end engineer where you like that role is better than being a mediocre back-end engineer where you don't like it. Either you don't have the skills, or you have all the skills in the world but you don't like your job. The other aspect I would like to say is that if you want to grow, become a tech lead, you have to be good at everything. Something on the front end, either mobile or web front end, ideally both, even to a limited extent. Right? And you have to be good at back end as well. So many architect jobs are highly back end focused. I'm not saying front end is not important, I'm saying back end is also important, right? So for growth, if you want to be a CTO someday or an architect or whatever it is, right? Advise companies. So at some point, unless you hate back end, you should do it sometime. But you should worry.
I find it fascinating.
Yes, then you should take on a back end role sometime or the other. Whatever you're doing now, let's say you're using, you're working on web front end, right? With which stack? Angular, okay. So Angular is a little older stack, but let's leave that aside. Once you feel you have learned everything there is with HTML, CSS, JS and Angular. When I say everything, I don't mean like everything, I mean everything that a typical app needs. For example, networking, layout, event handling, right? Creating reusable components, defining internal APIs or interfaces, right? All the things that a typical app needs, right? Once you have learned those things, maybe web workers if it is appropriate for your need, right? Not I need to learn web workers, but if it is appropriate, like again, in the course of work, whatever comes up, right? So once you have learned all of these things and you feel you are productive, you are proficient, you won't go online and say, hey, I am the world's biggest expert in Angular. But in your company, you are considered an expert. And everyone who is new says, oh, Angular, ask Satish. Once you've reached that level, then you should do backend at some point. So consolidate what you have, get that reputation, be the go-to guy. Then move on to the next technology, like backend. Yeah, so that's what I would suggest. But don't be worried. Worry comes from insecurity, and that's not a constructive emotion. Everybody is insecure. You, me, everybody. So that's not, that's not going to guide us towards making the right decisions. Fear-based decision making doesn't work. Warren Buffett says that that's one of the main causes of failure for investors.
Got it. I'll quickly share the summary of
Sure.
this. what I understood. So front end, back end, any function is a full time job by itself. So we all possibly can't learn everything right at the same point. But saying that at some point, if a person or I personally aspire to become a leader, tech leader like CPO or engineering manager, I need to get comfortable at backend considerably so that I can take decisions better and I can communicate it across, inside engineering, I can communicate better. I can understand the requirements. And a third point is I should become a go-to guy in any tech I'm working. Once I reach that state, uh, I should learn other things and, I think that will add value. So, yeah, these are the things.
Great. And no one needs to learn everything: back end, front end, mobile, machine learning, everything.
I just want to quickly share the product engineering versus engineering by engineering. Right? Arjun, so when we were building Future Camp, I was going to all the users in all the people in the co-working space, and I was saying, "Hey, our app processes 4 billion pixels per second." Everyone was like, "So yeah, what is there? It's a powerful iPhone. It should, right?" So then I showed all the photographs we took. This is nice. How you are doing this? And the person immediately paid, I think, 100 rupees or 150 rupees, and he downloaded that. He wanted to try it. He wanted to try hyperlapse like me. So yeah, that happened for us also in real life. Nice. Yes. I think I'll go with this question. So this is more like in terms of mental wellness. Uh, uh, how to identify that we are going through burnout, or how to the first part of the question is how to identify that we are at the starting phase or next phase of burnout, and second question is how to deal with it.
Yeah, this is a question that's outside my area of expertise. We all need to talk to a counselor for this. I'll share whatever little I know. Firstly, mental health is very useful. It's a very important topic that we need to discuss about. Unfortunately, there's a stigma about it. Even going to a counselor, right, or a psychologist, people say psycho. No, don't go to a psycho, right? Oh, they'll give you medicines, they will do this, they'll do that, they'll give you tablets, whatever, right? So there should not be a stigma about mental health any more than there is about going to a doctor for physical health. And it's an area we all need to think about because we all have a physical battery. Once we do a certain amount of work, if you run for a certain number of kilometers, your physical battery gets exhausted. We have an emotional battery. We have a mental health battery. We have a financial battery. When I started my startup, my financial battery was full. Then it came close to zero. And when I got the low power indication, I shut down the startup. Right? So similarly, we have a mental health and we have to optimize all these batteries. Any one battery, if it hits zero, we are screwed. Right? So the mental health battery is something we need to think about. Now, burnout is hard to recognize and hard to overcome. One sign of burnout is you spend hours doing stupid things. Maybe you watch, somebody told me he used to watch videos of people fighting in the subway for 5 hours continuously, or car crashes from afternoon till night. Something mindless, something dumb you just keep doing on YouTube, right? Or whatever app. So that is one thing. Different people respond differently. Some people overeat, right, to kind of deal with this emotion. I know someone who used to shop to improve her when she's feeling down, right? So, for example, she bought a soap for 1,000 rupees, one soap, right, at UB City. So, we need to recognize what we do. For me, it is watching dumb videos on YouTube. For some people, it is shopping to feel good, whatever, right? It's a symptom of, so that is one thing. The other thing is, whatever we do, we don't do it with a sense of enthusiasm, we do it with a sense of trepidation. Oh, I have to do it, it won't work probably, but I have to do it anyway, right? For example, if you are a consultant, when you talk to prospects, People who call up and say, hey, I want to work with you. What is going on in your own mind before you talk to them? Are you like, okay, this also may not work, but what to do? I'm in this job, I have to take this call. Or are you like, yes, this will work out, let me talk to them. So pay attention to, do you have a positive or a negative story that you're telling yourself? So that is one thing. How to deal with burnout? One is if you don't have a well-rounded life. For example, suppose you're working all the time, you don't watch movies or things like that, TV serials. You should have a well-rounded life. Or you don't spend enough time with your family. That really helps us feel better. The other thing is, this is not exactly what you asked, but how to prevent burnout, and we'll end with this. We'll move on to the next question after I'm done saying this. Is if your last 2 gigs have been a failure, say you started a startup and it failed, then you did something else and it didn't work out. Maybe you took up a job and it didn't work out, they asked you to leave, whatever, right? Third one, do something that will work, even if it is less ambitious. So this is one of the mistakes I made earlier, which has caused me also to become burnt out. We cannot take continuous failures. Failures are good, failures are part of life. Failures are what helps us grow, because you are failing if you are doing something new. If you have built an iOS app for 4 years and you continue building an iOS app, you won't fail, but you won't learn either much. So there's nothing wrong with failure as such, but we cannot handle too many consecutive failures. So if you start a startup, then it works, then it doesn't work, then you do something, it doesn't work, etc. So then reduce your ambition. Don't start another startup, because startups are 95% likely to fail. Do something else which is going to work, even if it is less ambitious. So that is one way I would suggest. Monitor whether so you can have success, failure, success, failure, success, failure. We can deal with that very well. We cannot have failure, 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 success, success, success. So the order matters. Yeah. Shall we move on to the next question, or would you like to summarize before that?
Yeah. So I'll quickly summarize what are the key points I understood. So similar to physical or financial battery, we also have an emotional battery or mental battery. Similarly, how we recharge other batteries, like how we handle other situations like physically or financially, we should take care of mental health also similarly, right? Second thing is how to identify we are going through the phase is uh, giving a keen attention to the attitude to each and every situation how we are doing it. For example, given an exciting opportunity, whether we are identifying it exciting or okay, maybe I'll do it or not, that is very important. How to prevent it is like, yeah, I think after continuous failures, failure by itself is not a bad thing, but after continuous failures, maybe we should do a short shot that will lead us to some success, right? To gain some momentum. I was reading Do Epic Shit by Ankur Warikoo. He said that resume is generally considered as sequence of success. Let me share my failure resume.
Yes.
So he shared his failure resume till now. So I always see this video content being doing such as, oh, this guy should be a prodigy. But all the ventures he had tried out to reach here, I can't imagine how many failures are. So yeah, acknowledging the failures and learning from it is very important.
On the note of resume, there's a joke I heard, which is the closest a person comes to perfection is when he writes a resume. So anyway, do either of you have any comment on burnout or mental health?
No, not from me.
I have personally discussed a lot about this topic with you, and I have taken your advices seriously, like consulting a professional. Yeah, I think all these points and more we have discussed. Maybe I'll write a blog on that.
Sure.
Might help a lot of people.
You should.
So yeah. So on this topic, I'll go with the next question.
Sure.
So this is again about documenting my ideas and knowledge, right? So my question is, Karthik, I want to document my tech and personal knowledge and share across platforms like LinkedIn or Medium. But I'm always, fear of rejection always pops up. I was just wondering, I know that you are writing from 2006. I still remember your first day in IIT Bombay. I still remember you riding in taxi, listening to, watching rain and entering campus. It was, I think it's a blog spot, right? Way back in 2006. As a person who is writing for more than a decade, I think you are in another 4 years, you'll close 2 decades. Have you ever felt this pressure of fear of rejection? You always share your thoughts like, across multiple verticals. Yeah. So one is, how can I? How do you think I should come across my fear of rejection, and how do you handle it?
So I have dealt with fear of rejection when I used to post my blog articles on Hacker News. And many engineers are lacking in soft skills. Right? That's why they got into engineering. People who are people focused will probably become counselors, right? All of us, we loved machines more than people, right? Including me. So that's the first thing, right? And people sometimes don't understand how it comes across. And on the internet, people are ruder than they are in real life and all these things, right? So one of the things I have stopped doing is I've stopped posting my articles to Hacker News. In fact, I deleted my Hacker News account because it's not constructive. So there are always places where you get non-constructive feedback. You also get constructive feedback from Hacker News, as an example, but the amount of unconstructive feedback was more. And it had a bigger impact on me. I used to worry about, how are people criticizing me today? So then I said, this is not worth it. And I stopped posting. So that's one thing. Unless you go to a forum which is full of engineers who kind of love to debate and criticize and everything, right? In general, you don't get much criticism. If you are posting on YouTube, if you are tweeting, if you are posting on LinkedIn or your blog or whatever, you don't get much criticism. People who are interested only come and read. So sometimes you get, what's the right word to use? Sometimes you get feedback. Somebody will interpret it differently from what you intended. And when you read it, you are able to see from their point of view that you ended up communicating something you didn't intend to communicate. Then you go back and edit it. We always think about catastrophic things when it doesn't happen. So if you say you should use functions as a service, somebody might interpret it as saying you should always use functions as a service. Then you go back and you use the word often, or consider using functions as a service in your next project instead of use functions as a service in your next project. So typically it is small things like this. Somebody can disagree on a specific aspect, and in some cases it is opinion based and there's nothing much to discuss. In other cases, you have a back and forth and you realize that it's actually a misunderstanding on their side. For example, I posted a video about SQL and NoSQL databases. One of the engineers I work with got back to me and he said, I don't agree for these 5 reasons. And we discussed it, and then it turned out that the issue was more subtle. And once I explained it, he agreed with me, right? So typically we just fear. No one will say, oh, Satish Kumar is a useless engineer, man, and everyone on the internet makes a note, okay, never work with Satish Kumar. That's never going to happen. We just worry unnecessarily. In fact, it presents us in a positive light as knowing something, because other people don't know what you know, right? They may assume you don't know much, like if you go for a job, right? And generally, people err on the side of safety. They don't assume you know everything, they assume you know nothing. Like, I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. So if you share, you're getting credit for what you know. And the people in the company who read your posts will increase your reputation. You may very well end up getting a job there, or you may be asked to advise that company, or anything can happen. So don't hesitate to share. Some of us are over humble, right? Like, one extreme is people talking about whatever they don't know, right? Like you writing an article on how to perform an open heart surgery, or me writing that article, right? Typically, we don't do that, right? And the other thing is, there's this thing about defensive writing. Some people, or defensive communication in general, some people, when they say things, they can get criticized. So they start communicating in a very defensive manner. They'll give a lot of disclaimers. They won't say do this. They'll say you should consider doing this, but then every situation is different and maybe it's not right for you, maybe it's right for you, and who knows, and this and that. And it waters down the communication. Finally, no one knows what the hell you're suggesting. You're just wasting time for everyone. And this is something that happens in academia also. My professor told me when I wrote my MTech report that this paragraph presents a simplification. And in a later paragraph, so he said this is not true all the time. I said, I agree, sir. In fact, the third paragraph explains when it is not true. He said, see, the problem is someone could look at just the first paragraph and criticize. So you shouldn't write that way. You should make yourself immune to criticism. That's a bad attitude, because you're writing for someone who has a bad attitude. That is why academic writing is so boring. Typically, when I read a paper on some topic, if it's a PDF and it looks like an academic paper, the time, the ratio of the value you get and the time it takes is often not favorable. You spend a lot of time to get some value. Blog posts are often better communications. So don't write defensively. You're not going to war. You don't need to hold up a shield. Write for somebody who is well intentioned, not someone who will nitpick. The nitpickers will nitpick anyway. And typically it doesn't happen. And if it happens, it means thousands of people are reading your content, which is a good place to be. So you will probably get 99% silence, 0.8% positive comments, 0.2% negative comments. So don't worry about it. Go ahead boldly. Question 6 in the Google Doc. Do you want to skip it or?
No. I wanted to continue this.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll ask that final question.
Sure.
Before that, I'll quickly summarize.
Sure.
So what was the take? Right. First, start sharing the document. That's the I think the bottom line. There are two takeaways. One is there will be often less non-constructive criticisms than I expect, right? Yeah, I think that, hey, Satish is very bad. What is he writing? He doesn't know anything. That was the thing. Right? No one is going to do that. Even let's say I share some article, even if it is wrong, some people who are, my niche audience, who I am trying to write for, they will note down the specific points and they will disagree with, and often it will improve me. So that is one thing. Second thing is, stop being over humble and just start writing. And once I start that, stop writing defensively. Right? I should always focus on well-intent readers than worrying about people who negatively criticize. So hopefully I'll start writing.
Great. It can be writing, it can be oral like a podcast, any form.
Sure. I'll go with my last question. Okay?
Sure.
So as a person who has you have worked in both corporate and startup ecosystems for a considerable amount of time, right? Very long period of time. I think in corporate you have worked in for 10 years, and in startup I think you're in last 5 or 6 years in startup ecosystem. Few of my friends are very concerned about me being in a startup for a long time, and they are saying that it is not, very. We still have a mindset that any job we have should be highly secure. We should not be fireable. We should not be we should be indispensable. So that's that. So they are genuinely worried about me, even though I am very comfortable in startup ecosystems, because the rate of learning and growth is very exponential compared to the average. But one of the very senior person I have talked to, he personally said that you should try out corporates like Amazon or Google. Like the learning and exposure there is on different scales. So these both points are contradicting. So I want to know your perspective. What do you think in terms of growth, learning,
Sure.
in terms of stability of a concept?
So first thing is, everyone should at some point in their career work on a scaled product at a prestigious company. When I say scaled product, I mean a product with 1 billion users, right? Or whatever the metric is. Google's load balancers process more than 100,000 requests per second, right? And so if you get to work on that team, great, right? Google's network switches, this is more hardware than software, but Google's data centers have at least 1 petabyte per second of bandwidth, not giga, not tera, 1 petabit. So if you are building that switch, right, of course that's a highly scalable job. So scale can be measured anyways, right? Requests, users, anything. So ideally 1 billion, at least hundreds of millions, right? All of us should work on that at some point in our career, because it teaches us best practices and how to build scalable things and so on. The first reason you should work on that is you will have more confidence in yourself. Because whatever you do next will be 100 times simpler. It's like an athlete, right? If he's going to run for a kilometer, he's going to train by running for 10 kilometers. So his body becomes very strong, and the race itself is not such a big deal. Whereas if you ask me to run a kilometer in a race, for me that's a big deal. I can maybe jog a kilometer but not run a kilometer, right? So doing more makes us feel comfortable, makes others feel comfortable in hiring us or choosing to work with us or whatever, right? And it teaches you skills, how to build a scalable system, how to do retries, how to prevent cascading failures, all these advanced things, right? And if you always have one step more skill than needed, you will be comfortable in any job, right? So that is one thing. And it's not just so both scale product and prestigious company matter. So Times Internet has 500 million users, but it's not prestigious. So that doesn't count.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Times Internet has 500 million users, but it's not prestigious. No one will say, oh man, he worked at Times Internet, we should hire him. Right? Whether that's fortunate or unfortunate. So that doesn't meet the criteria. It should be prestigious so that next time when you say, I worked at X. So I was talking to someone who said, I worked at Microsoft, then Apple, then Amazon. In my own mind, I was like, wow, this guy is really good. Even though I am as much of a meritocrat as anyone else. I believe it's all about merit, not the CV, not the company names. I was also impressed. It's a very powerful force. Everyone is impressed by this. So, and for a valid reason, right? They don't hire any Tom, Dick and Harry who comes along. So, it should be a prestigious company, not Times Internet, even though Times Internet has very high scale. And any product in a prestigious company doesn't work. So, for example, there's an admin console for Google Workspace. That doesn't meet the requirement of a scaled product. It has what, 10,000 users, 100,000 users, not 1 billion users. How many admins are there of Google Workspace accounts? So every company, all these big companies have that level of, so they have an 80-20 distribution. They have 20% of products that have 80% of the traffic, right? If you're working at Apple, work on the iPhone home screen. Don't work on something niche like, I don't know, like the HomePod noise cancellation. How many HomePods are sold? 100th as many as iPhones? Something like that, right? So, if you accept a job in a big company, insist on working on this. Whatever I'm working on has to have this. And often managers will try to hide the truth. So suppose you're working on YouTube. They'll say, oh yeah, YouTube has whatever, 2 billion users. But what you may be working on is a tool that helps creators contest a copyright infringement notice, which has whatever 10,000 users or something, 100,000 users, not a billion users. So the fact that YouTube has 2 billion users doesn't mean anything if your personal project within YouTube doesn't. So if you're working on the watch page, then that is scaled. If you're working on comments, then that's scaled. If you're working on search, that is scaled. So you should work on both a scaled project at a prestigious company. So that's something all of us should do. That's one part of it. In fact, I came across someone at Google who was asked to work on something niche, like the examples I gave. He said, no, I won't do that. If you want me to resign, I will resign. I didn't come here to work on niche stuff. Give me something that has at least 500 million users. Anything at all. Want me to work on Google Maps? I'll work on Google Maps. Want me to work on search? I'll work on search. But 500 million users. Because I came here as part of my career plan. And working on niche stuff does not meet my career goals. I'm very sorry, is what he said. I was impressed with his clarity. So that is what you should do, even if you work at some of these companies, which you should. And you should work there only for a while, couple of years, 2 years, move on. So that is one thing. The other thing is, stability can be an obsession. You can have too little stability in your life where you're stressed, you're not getting any money, money is going out every month, etc. But too much stability is also a problem. And I read in one of these books by Seth Godin about the comfort zone and the safety zone. And he says there's a very deep evolutionary reason for this. He says if you're a deer, let's say, you don't stray from the herd, because if you do, a lion will gobble you up and you're dead. So evolution has caused the deer to stay with the herd. It doesn't know why it stays with the herd, it just feels uncomfortable when it moves away. Right? Animals don't have cognitive facilities like us. They can't reason and justify and all these things. They behave instinctively. In the modern world, the safety zone and the comfort zone have diverged. Doing the thing that is safest or doing the thing that is comfortable, like working in a stable job, is not safe for you because you won't grow, you won't learn fast enough. And you will become irrelevant 5-10 years from now. So one of my friends from IIT, he stopped learning in 2007 when he graduated. And I wouldn't recommend her to be hired in any job because she's useless. Like I like her as a friend, but she's useless. So as the years go by, many people get into that situation. And they get into that situation because they have stopped learning. They are focused on comfort and stability and all these things. And it's also, so that's one thing. The other thing is, once at Google, we had a dialog box. It had an OK and a cancel button. The backend was already implemented. And so it was basically an edit button. There was some UI that was showing some data. If you want to edit it, there's an edit button. You tap the edit button, a dialog box comes up. It was implemented. There was an OK button. There was a cancel button. And the buttons were wired to the backend. So when you click the OK button, it would make a network call to the backend, and the backend logic was already implemented. The only thing I had to do was add 3-4 fields to this dialog box. Because it was just a blank dialog box that was partially implemented. It just had OK and cancel buttons. The actual data to edit was not there. It took me 1 month to get that through code review at Google. So big companies are very slow. And if you think about it, it's natural. Suppose you build something. Suppose you make a flower vase and it's beautiful. Everyone admires it. People come to your house to see the flower vase. Reporters come and write an article about it. And then someone has an idea, hey, why don't you modify the flower vase this way? It look more beautiful, or it's less likely to fall if you modify the flower vase this way. You will be very conservative. You don't want to screw up such a good flower vase at a human level. Whereas if you're building a new flower vase, you won't worry so much. Even if you get it wrong, it's okay. Now these products like Gmail and whatever else, they have a billion users. So the teams become very conservative. They don't want to make any change. If you ask me as a user, suppose I found that this Google Meet didn't work because some engineer made some change which was not good, I would be unhappy, right? We want our tools to work reliably. So when building, the focus is on progress. Once it is built, the focus is on stability. Like, it's okay if you don't improve it, but don't mess it up. So that is why big companies are incentivized towards stability. That is why they have very onerous code review processes, they have approval processes, they have all of these. So which means it's like running through water. You can't run fast no matter what you do. So which is why I think your friends who are obsessed about stability are wrong. A question for you, if you don't want to answer it, it's completely fine. Would you say you earn similar to your friends in the corporate world, or more or less? Like, we don't need to get into numbers, but even this answer, if you don't want to give, that's fine.
I think we can talk personally.
Sure.
But, I'm not
Sure. Not a problem. So would you like to summarize this?
Yeah, Karthik. So I think I had a lot of calls with people who are in Google for long term, and they have ventured into startups. And I know people who have started their career in startups and they have moved to Google. Both the perspectives are very similar to what we have shared. One person I know, he became principal engineer at Google, I think, very early, like 5 or 6 years of experience. And as soon as he became a principal engineer, he quit and he joined a very early stage startup. I was talking with him and I asked, why did you quit as soon as you got a promotion? Hey, so working on a product which has billions of users is sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a very bad thing. Because whatever product you start, any project you start, there will be always billions of users online. So you will be overly optimistic. There will be a lot of overly engineering, and at most of the time it will get squashed, right? The project might take longer time, and after 3 years of execution, manager will come and say that, hey, you know what, some other team is doing very well, and let's squash it in this. So he wanted to work on something that he can. It may not be a billion users, but he's happy with 100,000 users. But if it is creating a higher impact at a very short amount of time. So the person who I talked with, who moved transition from startup to corporate, his point was different. Yeah, I don't want to create an impact for 100,000. I want to create an impact for billions of users. I take pride in my engineering skills. I want to work on high scale projects. So yeah, the takeaways are both has its own advantages. Like corporates are incentivized to be conservative, while the startups are incentivized to faster execution and faster building. Yeah, Karthik, it answers and I think I also agree with going for more stability is also it's not a good thing. So yeah.
There's this one last thing I want to add. Someone gave this metaphor of your career as a mutual fund. When you invest in a mutual fund, it invests in multiple companies. Even if one company fails, you don't worry, because there are 29 other companies in your investment. Similarly, in your career, you are going to do different things. If one of them fails, that's still good if it leaves you in a better position than after. Going back to the mutual fund, if they invest only in failing companies, they'll go bust. Similarly, if you work only on things that don't work, because you are not focused on safety at all, that doesn't make sense. But saying that every company should be safe means that the fund invests in companies which are not going to result in much growth. They're not taking any risk. So yeah, you should take risks at some point and some point not. So for example, when I started FutureCam, I took on a huge risk, and I was dumb. I didn't know what I was doing, as first time founders often are. And it didn't work out, which is okay. Afterwards, I needed little more safety. So, different times, different things may be appropriate. It shouldn't be one thing throughout. It's like you run. Afterwards, you rest. Does it mean you need to run 24 hours? No. If someone says running is good, it doesn't mean you should run 24 hours. So there's a time to run, there's a time to rest. And then again, tomorrow you are refreshed, you run again. So that may also be a useful thing.
Okay.
Cool. So are there any questions from either of you on career growth?
I have, these are my all the questions. I don't have any.
Got it. So Arjun, let's discuss your coding question in the next video.
Yeah.
All right, guys?
Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
It was
happy
very
to.
insightful.
Yes. And to the viewers, hope you also enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll see you in the next video.